Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we're going to be learning primarily just Tes Amud Beis, which is a very long Amud, a beautiful and painful Amud, one that reflects difficult periods of our history. I overcompensated last night a little bit. We're starting at the very bottom of Daf Tes Amud Aleph, and we're only going to be learning the Amud Beis. We're starting 5 lines from the bottom of Tes Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Yochanan ben Torsa. Rav Yochanan ben Torsa says, Mipnei machar v'Shilo. Why was it that Shiloh was destroyed? What was in Shiloh? That doesn't mean the city alone. Why was the Mishkan in Shiloh destroyed? Says the Gemara, Mibnei shahayu bashnei dvarim. There were 2 flaws of the Jewish people at that time. Gilui arayos ubizayon kachim. These were the 2 things that they did wrong. Gilui arayos is, of course, inappropriate relationships. The Gemara is going to give the parameters of what actually took place. And the second is bizayon kachim. And here is how they each play out. 4 lines from the bottom. Tes Amud Aleph, Gilui Arayos. What happened with the Gilui Arayos? The pasuk writes, "Ve'eli zakein me'od, v'shamas kol asher yasun banav l'chol Yisrael, v'asher yishkavunes hanoshim." They were lying with the women. Hatzovos Pesach Ol Moed, who were there by the Pesach Ol Moed to bring their korbanos. An unbelievable accusation that they were being yishkavunes es hanoshim. Says the Gemara, V'yafal gavdu Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachmeni Amar Reb Yochanan Kol ha'omer b'nei Eli chatu einu ela toeh. The pasuk seems very clear from the pasuk actually, that they were yishkavim v'chanoshim, that they were intimate with the women. But if that's the case, then what does the Gemara Maseches Shabbos mean? A Gemara that we learned many moons ago that indicates that anyone who says that the b'nei Eli were chote einu ela toeh, that they actually did not do any avera. So how do we understand that? Answers the Gemara, last word on Tes Amud Aleph, mitoch sheshahu es kinehen, skip the next word miha, mitoch sheshahu es kinehen, ma le'alein akasuv ki'ila shechavum, because they delayed the kinehen, the bird offerings. When a woman would show up to the Beis HaMikdash as a yoledes, we know that she was not with her husband for a very long time. Obviously, she wasn't allowed to because she didn't have tahara yet. She had to achieve tahara by bringing the korbanos. Take a look at Rashi. The top Rashi on the page, Dibur Hamaschel Sheshoas Kinehen. Rashi says, they would bring at the completion of their Yemei Leda Litaher, to become Torlechol Bekachim. The Haim Hayu Baale Geos, but the sons of Eli, they were Baale Geos. They were, overly, they were Baale Gaiva. Bahim Yisrashlan, they were very slow Bahakravasan in bringing these korbanos, and bringing these birds for the women. The Hanashim, and the women, Mamtinos sham ad sheyikravu. Umishtahu smilachzer lemakom etzel ba'alein mavalan es hanoshim miperi avarivya. Says the Gemara, what was the crime? So just going back in our Gemara, mitoch shesho es kinehen, the korbanos that needed to be brought for the women for them to achieve tahara. When they got there in the Beis HaMikdash, all right, we'll take care of your korbanos. A little bit later, you rest, you sit. It's been a long walk. Says the Gemara, that's not right. And Rashi is explicit in that it's a bittul of the mitzvah of pru or vu, and therefore the Gemara says, unbelievable, it sounds backwards a little bit, like you're treating them as though they slept with women, even though what happened was specifically that the women couldn't sleep with their husbands. It's a fascinating thing. It's a little bit of a backwards play, but it was to indicate, of course, it's just a strong consequence, in other words, of what was actually going on. So now, just to say it explicitly in another way, one of the reasons why the Mishkan was destroyed was because of the bittul of the mitzvah of Piri of Arivya. It's unbelievable. You were preventing people from having children, slowing them down even by a couple of days. So that's one of the reasons why the poskim are very makbid on birth control. So this was when I remember when I was in Smicha, we had a whole Charif shiur on this, that the mitzvah of Pru or Vu, or the mitzvah of Pru or Vu, it's like the mitzvah of Tefillin, that when it's Shach, you have an obligation. You're not able to because of physical, medical issues, mental health issues. Okay, so then you have a kula, then fine. Just like the Shulchan Aruch writes, that if a person has a crushing stomach ache or a crushing headache, you're patur from the mitzvah of tefillin that day. Fine, there are times when it applies. But the mitzvah of birth, of having children, of pru or vu, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, and it's not stam that you can just take birth control like water. That's not correct. You first have to maybe have boy and girl, depending on their shitas. So I don't paskin anything. So when people call and ask that question, I call a Rav, and they say to me, tell me about the mental health status of the family. Are there any medical issues? What's the quality of the relationship? You get into it. If having the child is going to be worse than not having the child, so then that's a problem. Then you put the family on birth control. Okay. So we're very makbid on that, and we can see from here that the Mishkan in Shiloh was destroyed, at least in part, for reason number one. Reason A is because the Bnei Eli withheld the women from having access to their husbands by delaying their korbanos. Line 2 on Testament base, Bizayon Kachim, there is also a Bizayon of Kachim. The next 6, 7 lines are all psukim in Shmuel. In Shmuel Aleph, and here's how the psukim read: Gam b'terem yaktiru netzachele, before they would bring the korbanos. So Banara Kohen, there was someone who was serving the Kohanim, and he would say to them, "V'amar l'isha zovech," and he'd say to the guy doing the shechita, "Tzna basar litzlos lekohen, v'lo yikach mimcha basar mevushal." Give me some meat, but I don't want you to cook it. Give it to me raw. That wasn't allowed. The Kohanim were allowed to have elements of the korbanos, but they had to be karev first. They had to be burned first. They had to be cooked first. Otherwise, you weren't allowed to take it. I only want a rabbi. Yom I love the person doing the shechita would say Haish kator yaktir, and it has to be cooked first. Kayom hachelev v'kach l'cha kasher tav enavchecha. Let me do my job. Let me cook everything, and then take whatever you want. You guys are kohanim here. You have every right, but don't take it raw. Amar lo, and he says to them, Ki atati tein v'im lo lakachti b'chazaka. If you v'im lo lakachti b'chazaka v'atihi chatas anam gedol me'odes b'nei Hashem ki noatzu anushim es min chas Hashem. So they said, you're going to give it to me. And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to take it from a strong hand. I'm not letting you get away with this. You're going to give me the raw meat. So the Gemara says, unbelievably, that because it's not Shabbos, it's not a Chil Yom Kippur, nothing. We're talking about two things that, in the scheme of things, we probably never would have picked out. The first is the bittul of the mitzvah of pru or vu, and the second is that they tried to take korbanos before they were cooked. That brings us to the two dots, the last of the very short lines, first of the middle width lines on Daf Tetzamud Beis. This Gemara is one of the most famous Gemaras in Shas. Everybody knows it. Yoma Daf Tes is quoted regularly to discuss the reasons why the Batei Mikdash were destroyed. We just learned about the Mishkan. Now let's dig into the Batei Mikdash itself. Mikdash Rishon mipnei macharav. What is the reason why the first Batei Mikdash was destroyed? As we all know, mipnei gimel dvarim shahayu bo. There were three things that took place during that time: avodah zara, v'gilui arayos, u'shvichus damim. There was idol worship, there were inappropriate relationships, and there were shvichus damim, there was murder. Avodah zara, let's go through each one. Avodah zara, dechsiv kikatar hamatzah mihistareah. The couch, the bed was very short, so people couldn't stretch out. What does that mean? My katar hamatzah mihistareah. Rav Yonasan katzar matzah, so short, because it's as if they had two gods there. So Rashi points out that there was a petzel that was put into the mikdash. You've got a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and you've got the petzel, then they cannot be shneim gebayim kecha. That's not allowed. It doesn't work. And the rest of the pasuk reads v'hamasechot sarah kis kanes. What does that mean? Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmeni kimati Rav Yonasan lahai kra. Whenever Rav Yonasan would read this pasuk, this is a pasuk that's in Yeshai. Whenever he get to this pasuk, bachi. He would always cry. Why would he always cry? Because Amar man dechsiv be, about he, capital H, about he whom we said kones kaned mehayam, that he is the one who split the sea. This is a Kadosh Baruch Hu b'chavodu v'atzmo, about the same person we're going to say naseis lo masecha tzara, that he has a masecha, he has a petzel that's in there who is a tzara. The language of tzara is like we see by Penina and Chana. The Penina and Chana, we refer to the other wife as a tzira, the other woman who causes me problems. So this language over here, there's an idol there that's causing me problems. It says that's shot in the pasuk. So all of that explains the avodah zara that took place in Mikdash Rishon. What was the second crime? Gilui arayos dechsiv vayomer Hashem yan ki gavu b'nos Tzion, because the women of Tzion were gavu. They were very haughty. Vatelachlan netuyos garon, they had outstretched necks. Umisakros einayim, they painted their eyes. Haloch v'tafof telachna uveraglam te'asachna. They would, we'll see in the Gemara what all these terminologies mean. And let's get through each part of the pasuk. We're about a third of the way down, about 10 lines into the wide middle width lines. Yan ki gavu b'nos Tzion, what does it mean that they were haughty? Shahayim mahalchos aruka b'tzad k'tzara. They would stand one tall woman next to a shorter woman. And when a taller woman would stand next to a shorter woman, she, the taller one, was more noticeable. It would accentuate her, make her more noticeable. It was not sanua. What was the next part of the pasuk? They would walk with their necks outstretched. They were standing up with good posture. It doesn't mean good posture as it relates to your spine. It means that they were standing in a way that wasn't modest, and we all know what that means, even though it's sometimes hard to define. You can tell when someone is standing in a way which is not modest, and that's what the Gemara is referring to here. They were painting their eyes. They would put in kuchla, which was eye makeup blue, whatever it says kuchla, but it's lav dafka, the color is blue. But Mali and Kuchla Einin, they would be painting their eyes. Haloch v'tafoch telach. Now, what does that mean? Mahalchos ekev b'tzad agul. They would have their heel by b'tzad godel, excuse me, ekev b'tzad godel. They had their heel by their toe. So if you have your heel by your toe, it means your stride is very short. In other words, you are walking very slowly, enabling people to stare still more. So it was this kind of like, it didn't look right. It didn't look. It just you were not sanu. It was not a reasonable presentation of a bas Torah. It's not the right way to do it. That there was poison in their feet. What does that mean? Says the Gemara. Amar of Yitzchak Shai Mevios Mor va'afar Simon. They would put these beautiful smelling oils or something in their shoes. Umanipos b'min alehen ukshemagios etzel bachurei Yisrael. When they'd walk by the yeshiva boatos, they would kind of move their feet around in their shoes, and it would make the smell of the mor and the afar Simon flower out everywhere. It smelled great. And then umatizos alein, it would the smell would be sprayed everywhere. Umachnis and bohen. And in the men, there would be a yetzer hara ke'eres bekos, it would be, or ke'eres be'akus, according to a different gear. So basically, it was a poisonous smell, and that is a big problem. So the Rambam in Hilchos Isurei Bia, he writes, we discussed this recently, this just came up, that the smell a woman's perfume, b'dafka is nisr derabanan. He quotes it as that. To dafka get a hana from that is nisr derabanan, and that assumes that there's no hirhurim attached. The hirhurim are separate of any of this isser, of any other isser. The hirhur, and the Gemara in Avodah Zarah writes that the pasuk writes, "V'nishmar to mikol davar ra." The Gemara darshans shelo yeharher adam v'yom v'yavoli dekari b'layla. That a person shouldn't have inappropriate thoughts during the day, which could lead to mikra laila, which could lead to to a seminal emission. So there, Tosfos on the spot writes that that's a drasha gemura. He writes that that's a real isser d'oraisa. So that's a discussion of the Rishonim as to whether or not the machshava in and of itself is problematic. But we're looking at the smelling of the perfume in a vacuum, that alone, with no other implications. So that the Rambam codifies in a halacha that's deemed to be dinei derabanan. So that was Isser number 2 that took place of Gilui Arayos. It's interesting to note, no Tashmish Hamita took place here, right? It doesn't say anybody was intimate. It just says that these were the crimes, as it were, of the way that women were dressing and acting. It doesn't say that any Tashmish Hamita took place. Yet it's one of the reasons why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Number 3, almost halfway down. Shfichus damim. What about murder? Dichsi v'gam dam noki shafach menashe harbe me'od. Ad asher milei es Yerushalayim peh lo peh. So much blood that Menashe spilled in Yerushalayim. One person. Again, we're talking about the Churban Beis Hamikdash. These crimes need to be egregious in order to knock down the Beis Hamikdash. And what was the first one? Okay, there was Avodah Zarah. We'll give you that one. That was the checked box. You did a bad job. But the Gilui Arayos was not Gilui Arayos, not halachically at least. There's a Gemara somewhere in Shas, maybe in Kesubos, where this could lead to. But it could be, but like you're going to be a nechar of the Beis Hamikdash. Kadosh Baruch Hu decided that we have to destroy the Beis Hamikdash because she's walking bepritzus. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's mutter because it's not mutter. I'm just saying that like it just sounds like it needs to be like next level crimes in order to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. That's what the Gemara says, and all of that was about Mikdash Rishon, which indicated, the Gemara says explicitly, that the reason why it was Nechra was because of the Gimel Averos Chamuros. Parenthetically, the Gemara in Sota also writes that there are more than 3 mitzvahs that are Yehareg Val Yavor. It's not just Avodah Zarah, Gil Rash, Shvichus Damim. What does the Gemara there include? So Tosfos there on Sota, almost the same daf, I think it's daf Yud or something like that. So there he says that to be Malbin Pnei Chaveru B'Rabim is also Yehareg Val Yavor. And Tosfos says, why is it that it wasn't listed in the Gemara whenever we list the Gimel Mitzvos Yehareg Val Yavor? Because it's not Psukim Mefurish in the Torah. It's an unbelievable idea to embarrass someone in public is Yehareg Val Yavor. So that's a big machlokas in the postgame. Is that Ladina? That like, are we supposed to kill that person? Is that, it's a, it's not. It was buried when they were doing this. Oh, is that in the name of, I presume in the name of Arisha? Does it say who that was? Is that right? I didn't even see that here. It's not oh. Question still stands from the text of the Gemara. It's very inappropriate. And let's even say it's an Isser D'Oraisa. It's not, but like, I don't know. If you're right. That's the verse. Yeah. Is it that type of next level crime that warrants the Churban Beis Hamikdash? And now this is really where the Musar starts, and we're in the middle of Sfira. So this Gemara fits perfectly halfway down. Of Al Mikdash Sheni, Shahayu Oskin the Torah. They were learning Shtark. Uve mitzvot. They were also keeping mitzvot. Ugmilus chatzadim. They were being nice people. Mibnei ma'acharav. Mibnei shahai sabo sinas chinam. Because the culture there was a very backstabbing culture. It wasn't a place where people were nice to one another. We couldn't agree with everyone. You're different than me. I don't like you. So says the Gemara, and I know we've all said this line, we've all seen this line before, but we need to take it apart and really understand it. The equivalent of sinas chinam is to that of keneged shalosh averes avodah zarah gilaros shvichus damim. You have to understand, to hate another Jew is equivalent to 3 capital crimes. What?
For no reason.
Right, for no reason. Oh yeah, sinas chinam, right? Chinam mamish. No, there are times that Avei Hashem sinura. We have that pasuk in Tehillim, and that's halacha l'maisa. For example, v'hafta the reach kamocha is dafka to a reya, and there are people who are not in the category of maskin. The people are not in the category of reya, that's for sure. But sinas chinam stam, that I don't agree with you, so therefore I dislike you. So then you may as well, I'm not saying it's mutter, but you may as well at that point have done avodah zara, gil eretz, and shvichus damim, because that is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu views these 2 crimes. So this was this was even a lesser crime during Sfira, because it was lo nagu kavod zebazeh, that they just weren't being respectful to one another. And for Talmidei Chachamim, the standard was very, very high. Nevertheless, that is the equivalence that the Gemara makes between the Churban Beis HaMikdash Rishon and Churban Beis HaMikdash Sheni, that shkula sinas chinam keneged shalosh averos. The Meforshim do skip some of the Meforshim skip the next 5 lines or so. We can read them just the same. I mean, it's practical information for us to know. Where it says, Rishayim hayu, ela shetala bitchonim ba'akadosh baruch hu. There was a little bit of a ruse. They were not good people, but they were also, trusting in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So just on a practical note, who's saying this? I didn't know what this meant when I first saw it. So some of the Meforshim say that it's actually going back to where we started today. We started today on the bottom of Testament Aleph with the comment of Amar Rav Yochanan ben Torsa. So some of the Meforshim say that this is a continuation of that comment. And he says, Rishayim hayu, they were really bad people. What is that talking about? Says the Gemara, that's going back on our middle conversation. We spoke about Shiloh, the Mishkan, and then Mikdash Rishon and Mikdash Sheni. We're going back to Mikdash Rishon. Says the Gemara, still in the Mikdash Rishon, when we have a kesev yiksamu, ve'al Hashem yishanu, lomar, halo Hashem b'kirbeinu, lo savo aleinu ra. We did all these bad things, but no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu likes us. We're chummy, we're good friends. Everything is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. The fichach, hevi alin HaKadosh Baruch Hu gimel gzeros keneged gimel averos shebiyadan shenamar lachein biglalchem Sion sadeh techaresh, right? Yerushalayim iyin tihyeh v'har havayis lebamot yar. So the Sion, you have to hear the phrases are important to it. Sion is going to be plowed over. Yerushalayim will become iyin, will become piles of stone, piles of rubble. V'har havayis lebamot yar, and that too is also going to become broken down into pieces. Asks the Gemara, last of the middle width lines. Asks the Gemara, b'mikdash rishon lo haya b'sinas chinam. Everyone was so lovey-dovey by Mikdash Rishon too. That doesn't make sense either. V'aksiv, the pasuk writes, what does the pasuk say? Let me just read it properly. I did look this up earlier, but forgot. Megurei el cherev hayu esami lachein sefok al yarech. He says that they were not nice to one another. There were knives, and lachein al sefok, you would hit your leg like in surprise. Like, this is not good that people are treating each other this way. V'amar Reb Elazar, elu b'nei adam she'ochlin v'shosim zeim zeh. We sit at the same tables, we have sudas together, and then when we leave your house, we throw the spears out of our mouths. Someone sent in one of the various WhatsApp groups I'm in, someone sent it was a video clip which I did not watch, but the screen of the video just on the front was someone's mouth open and bullets coming out of their mouth. That was the imagery, mamish, literally like what the Gemara is portraying here, that there literally are spears. You go to someone's house for lunch, you walk out, they're like, they're okay people, no, that's not right. That's sinas chinam. And the Gemara says that existed even the Beis HaMikdash Rishon. So that's a stira. Why would the first Beis HaMikdash only be called out for avodah zara, gilui eretz, and shvichus damim when they had sinas chinam as well? I read you said that by Beis HaMikdash Sheni, that was the whole reason why they were destroyed. So it says the Gemara, hahi b'nesiya Yisrael havoy. That was only true by the Nesiya Yisrael, by the leaders. What kind of answer is that? We said earlier that Menashe was the only one who killed people. All of a sudden, that's why the Beis Hamikdash gets destroyed. Difficult Gemara to understand. So even Ben Yisrael, who dechsiv in the beginning of the pasuk that we read earlier, Za'ak ve'helel ben Adam ki he ha'isa be'ami. The Tanya Za'ak ve'helel ben Adam yachol hakol. Did it apply to everyone that they were not that they had some sina? Talmud Lomar he bechol nesiei Yisrael. That was only true of the leaders, not of everyone. So we didn't put it on all of the Jewish people, and that was not the reason why the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, only for the three reasons that were already indicated of the Gimel Mitzvot Harag Ve'al Yavor. We're about 2/3, 3/4 of the way down, three lines into the widest lines of the Gemara. We're going to go until about 4 or 5 lines from the bottom, and then we'll stop for the evening. Rabbi Yochanan v'Rebbe Elazar, D'amrei Tarvaihu, Rishonim sheniskala avonam niskala kitzam. By the first Beis Hamikdash, where everybody knew it was public, like those letters that they put up in Yerushalayim, the posters. What are they called? Fashkevilen. It's a Yiddish word. I'm not going to remember that. Fashkevilen. So they hang up. So everyone knows. Oy lanu ledavonenu, like these signs that went up. What did we do? The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of us. It was public information as to why it was. Therefore, it was public information as to why it was destroyed. Therefore, niskala kitzam. They knew that the new Beis Hamikdash was going to be destroyed. The Navi tells us it's going to be another 70 years. The Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt. Achronim, but the second Beis Hamikdash, clearly we don't know when it's going to be rebuilt. Otherwise, we'd have the date circled in red in the calendar. We'd have a whole plan. Achronim shelo niskala avona. People were like, nah, they didn't really get it. They didn't chap that what they did was mamash a problem of sinas china. Says the Gemara. So the Achronim shelo niskala avonam lo niskala kitam. They never found out when the Beis Hamikdash would come back, and we still don't know when it is. It just clearly hasn't happened yet. Amar Reb Yochanan Tova Tziporen Shel Rishonim. Sorry, let me read that with better punctuation. Amar Reb Yochanan Tova Tziporen Shel Rishonim. The nail of the elders was better than Mikresan Shel Achronim, than the stomachs of the Achronim, namely the older generation was much, much greater. No, that's not true. The later Jews were better. At least by Churban, at least by Beis Hamikdash Sheni, at least they were learning a lot of Torah. So what does that mean? If you learn Torah without good midos, so it still has value. Maybe that's the idea of Hamor Shabayachzer Lemutav. Yeah, how do you solve that problem of having bad midos? So we've learned this over and over and over again. And for anyone who's ever spent a year in yeshiva, any significant amount of time sitting and hitting the books, it makes you feel different. If you're really sitting down and paying attention, it makes you feel a little different. So the Gemara says, Afal Pi, that there was sinas china, but their Talmud Torah makes them better than the Doros Harishonos, where they were violating these 3 isurim. Says the Gemara, Amar Le, Bira. How do we answer this question? Which one is right? Do we say the Rishonim are better? Do we say the Achronim are better? Amar Le, Bira Tochiach. The Mikdash is a proof. Shechazra the Rishonim, v'lo Chazra la Achronim. I can give you a riot that the Rishonim were better because look what they got 70 years later. There was a generation of people who lived through both Batei Mikdash. You had to live till 70. You might have been a kid when the first Beis Hamikdash was around. If you lived till 100. You could have been 30 when the first Beis Hamikdash was Necharav, and you could have been alive when they sanctified the second Beis Hamikdash. Wow, that's a very small group of people. It's an unbelievable thing to be able to see both Batei Mikdash. Incredible. Shalu es Rebbe Elazar, Rishonim Gedolim or Achronim Gedolim. So they brought the question to Rebbe Elazar, was the Gadol Ador in Eretz Yisrael at the time. Amar Lahem, Tzinu Einechem Babira. Go take a look. See which one got the Beis Hamikdash rebuilt after them. Was it the Rishonim or the Achronim? Pashut, it was the Rishonim. They lost the first but got the second, and we are still in the vacuum of an absence of a Beis Hamikdash. Shika Amrei, a different language but similar result. Amar lahem eidechem bira. Let the bira be your eidim. Let him be your witness that clearly we know our answer that the Rishonim were greater. Reish Lakish Avisachi b'Yarden. Reish Lakish was going to the mikvah, bathing. He was doing something in the Yarden. Also, Rabbi Bar Chana went over to him. Yohav layada. He saw he was getting out, so he gave him a hand to help him, stabilize. When you're walking up a bank, it's slippery, you could fall. So he offered him a hand. Amar le, elaka sinina lechu. God does not like you. Sinin in Aramaic, sin and samech are interchangeable. Hashem hates you. You Babylonians. The pasuk writes as follows: Im chomahi nivne aleha tiras kaseh, im delasino tzur aleha luach orez. A pasuk from Shir Hashirim. Have Had it been that you made yourselves as stable as a wall, really firm, really believing in your ideals, had all of you come back in the times of Ezra, beautiful. Then you would have been compared to Ketev, and Ketev, for as much as it tarnishes, but it doesn't spoil. No bugs are going to eat it. No animals are going to, it's not going to decay. It's going to stay. It might look gross, but as long as you polish it, everything will be fine. But no, you guys are, it wasn't good. You're similar to the delasos in the pasuk, the delas instead of the choma. And the door, what's the door made out of? Nimshaltem ke'erez. You're compared to cedar wood, but all wood, at the end of the day, all wood can burn, all wood can rot. She'arekev sholet bo. I have a tree in front of my house that they injected with like a couple of $1,000s of some type of tree medication to get rid of, what's that thing called? The ash borer, whatever that bug is. So I said, can you please cut down this tree? Branches keep falling. They said, I can assure you they will not. There's a little tag on the tree. They spent a truckload of money on the tree because it's a big tree. It's 10, 20,000 pounds. And they don't want it to come down. So they invested money in it. But still, Afal Pikein, they know that wood can spoil. The same is true. My erez. What is the magic of the erez tree? Why did you pick that type of wood? Says the Gemara, Amar Ula, Sasmagor. What is Sasmagor? Take a look at Rashi, 3/4 of the way down. Dibur Hamaschil, Amar Ula Sasmagor. It destroys it and it drags it from within, namely it consumes from the inside. Sasmagor Shem Tolas. It's the name of a particular type of worm that eats a tree from the inside. My Sasmagor, what's the comparison of a Sasmagor in as a mashal nimchal? How does that play out? Rabbi Abba Baskol. It's the difference between a nevuah and a baskol. Kidetanya. It's such an important Gemara for Jewish history, by the way. When these last 3 Nevi'im died, remember they were part of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. I don't know what active role they played in the Siddur, but there was a lot of important enactments that took place in the Anshe Knesset Agdola for our modern day Judaism. At that time, Nistalka Ruach HaKodesh mi Yisrael. There's no more Nevuah. However, says the Brisa, says the Gemara, that it's true that from the outside, that's the outside is one thing, but the inside is another. And the inside, the Nevuah, the deepest form of prophecy, we no longer have with the death of Chagai Zachariah Malachi, Nistalka Nevuah. But there is still one thing left, that there's a baskol. It's amazing. Had we heard a baskol, we would have assumed, I presume, that to be more impressive than we would have assumed to be a nevuah. But that's, of course, not the way that it works. To have a Navi speak to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, or in dreams, as most Nevi'im, except for Moshe, Rabbeinu Moshe was Peh El Peh. All the other Nevi'im were Derech Cholom, but still, a Baskol, to hear a Kadosh Baruch Hu speaking from the sky. And by the way, a Baskol, we don't paskin like a Baskol. We've seen this a few times in Shas already, that either Baskol's Lo Ba'ator, Lo Ba'Shamayim. It's down here for us to be toil and to be amal and to try to figure out. We're going to stop right here, 5 lines from the bottom at Bereish Lakish. Tomorrow night we'll learn Daf Yud. Wishing you all a beautiful night.